Turkey. Land of ancient ruins. Land of incredible landscapes. Land of markets and centuries-old traditions. Colorful hot air balloons glide gently over a remote valley. The scent of incense rises slowly from the mosques. Traces of history hide among dust and silence. Welcome to Turkey. Welcome to the only country in the world that spans 2 continents. Known as a bridge between East and West, this is a place where minarets dot the horizon, where the scent of spices fills the air, and where the world's oldest temple emerges from the sand. But let's start from the beginning. Turkey stretches between Europe and Asia in a territory divided by the Bosphorus, which makes Istanbul the only city in the world to be situated on 2 continents. Here, about 97% of the land is in Asia, in the region called Anatolia, while the remaining 3% belongs to Europe, in the area of Thrace. This nation is surprisingly vast, with its 783,000 square kilometers, which is almost as large as Germany, the United Kingdom, and Italy combined. A true geographical giant that hosts an incredible diversity of landscapes. Indeed, although mountains cover about 75% of the territory, we can find salt deserts like Lake Tuz, which alternate with snowy mountains like Ararat, or beaches with turquoise waters that give way to deep canyons, or even volcanic valleys that transform into subtropical coasts. Furthermore, there are 3 seas that bathe its shores, and they are the Mediterranean to the south, the Aegean to the west, and the Black Sea to the north, giving this land over 7,000 kilometers of coastline. In this country, you can experience even 4 different seasons in the same day, simply by moving from one region to another. Continuing, this land bears witness to a history as ancient as humanity itself. It has welcomed 1,000-year-old civilizations, such as the Hittites, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and Ottomans, and each has left an indelible mark. At Göbekli Tepe, for example, stands the oldest temple in the world, predating even Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids, a monument that has watched over this territory for over 11,000 years. Turkey has also been a secular land since 1923. But despite this, about 99% of its population professes the Muslim religion, mostly of the Sunni tradition, creating a unique balance between modernity and tradition. And then there are the cultural treasures of this nation, which are recognized worldwide, with 21 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, one of the countries with the most protected cultural riches in the world. In everyday traditions, however, Turkey reveals its most authentic soul. The hammam, for instance, the traditional Turkish bath inherited from the Romans and perfected by the Ottomans, is not simply a place of cleansing, but a space for relationship, relaxation, and spiritual renewal. Or there is the Nazar Bonku, which is the famous blue eye against the evil eye, a symbol that accompanies tourists and residents wherever they go. It can be found hanging on doors, inside cars, in shops, and even on newborns. It's a powerful cultural symbol that transcends religiosity, uniting people in a shared belief. Another important curiosity concerns tulips. In fact, despite the world associating them with Holland, few know that these flowers are originally from Turkey and were exported to the Netherlands in the 16th century, becoming from then on a symbol of that nation. Speaking of gastronomy, meanwhile, Turkish cuisine defies any attempt at uniform definition. There isn't just one Turkish cuisine, but several, and they vary according to the region where one finds oneself. Kebab, baklava, raki, and Turkish coffee, the latter recognized by UNESCO as cultural heritage for its preparation technique, are ambassadors of this culinary diversity in the world. And although Turkish coffee enjoys international fame, tea is actually the most consumed national beverage, served in characteristic tulip-shaped glasses which recall that ancient connection with the symbolic flower. Finally, in this land of mysticism and spirituality, the dance called Sema represents one of the deepest expressions of the Turkish soul. Founded by the followers of the poet Rumi, this hypnotic dance, recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage of humanity, is not a show but a spiritual practice performed by dervishes, who are a kind of mendicant friars. The dancers, dressed in white with conical brown hats, rotate on themselves for hours counterclockwise, positioning themselves in different ways, such as with hands raised toward the sky, or with the right hand facing upward and the left downward, symbolizing the flow of divine energy that crosses the universe. Turkey, therefore, is much more than just a country. It is a crossroads of civilizations, a mix of landscapes and traditions that continues to tell its story to anyone who visits it. But now, let's discover the most incredible places in this nation. Cappadocia and Göreme. A lunar landscape, but right here on Earth. Cappadocia is an open-air museum where wind and rain have sculpted volcanic rock into impossible shapes. The fairy chimneys rise like sentinels in the desert, while underground ancient cities of 8 floors hide. At dawn, hundreds of hot air balloons color the sky, offering surreal views of canyons and valleys. People have lived in these rocks for centuries, carving out houses, churches, and warehouses, while today many of these caves are luxury hotels. In the heart of this natural wonder, moreover, stands Göreme, a village surrounded by countless rock formations. This area, declared a UNESCO Heritage Site, contains over 30 churches and chapels carved into the rock between the 10th and 12th centuries. The Byzantine frescoes inside tell sacred stories through the centuries, preserved thanks to the dry climate of the region. Silence surrounds the characteristic fairy chimney houses, where many locals still live today, preserving this ancient tradition in a landscape that defies both time and logic. Antalya. Where the Mediterranean Sea meets the Turkish coast, Antalya tells the story of civilizations that have succeeded one another for millennia. The turquoise waters lap not only beaches, but also limestone cliffs, while the sun transforms the horizon into a spectacle of changing colors. The modern tourist port teems with yachts and boats, while the historic center, called Kalaycı, preserves stone streets that lead to carefully restored Ottoman houses, transformed into boutique hotels. The arches of Hadrian's Gate, meanwhile, testify to the passage of the Romans, and thus connect the present to the past with silent elegance. In the surroundings, waterfalls plunge directly into the sea, creating a spectacle that attracts visitors from around the world. Antalya represents not just a seaside destination, but a crossroads of cultures that continues to live through every stone and every wave. Bodrum. Where the Aegean Sea embraces the Turkish peninsula, Bodrum reveals itself with white houses that descend to the port. The medieval castle of the Knights of St. John dominates the bay, and today houses the Museum of Underwater Archaeology, exhibiting artifacts recovered from ships that sank 3,000 years ago. Bodrum's marina, with its luxurious yachts and sailboats, extends along the coast, while on the hill stand the characteristic white windmills, once functional, that captured the sea breeze to grind grain. At night, the city transforms with lights that illuminate seaside restaurants and clubs, where music continues until dawn. Bodrum, therefore, is not just a summer destination, but a place where history and present merge along the narrow streets, all of which always lead toward the blue sea. Trabzon and Sümele Monastery. Trabzon overlooks the Black Sea and has a very ancient history. Once it was part of the Empire of Trebizond, which is a kingdom that continued to exist as the last Byzantine territory, for almost 10 years after Constantinople, which is present-day Istanbul, fell into the hands of the Ottomans. The city preserves the Church of Hagia Sophia, transformed into a mosque with well-preserved medieval frescoes despite the centuries past. Furthermore, the castle with its mighty walls dominates the city panorama and testifies to the strategic importance that the city has had over the centuries as a defensive bulwark. A few hours from the city, the Sümele Monastery defies gravity, clinging to a rock face at 1,200 meters altitude. The building, founded in the 4th century, seems to grow from the rock itself, while preserving frescoes that tell sacred stories. Legend has it that 2 monks found a miraculous icon of the Virgin Mary here, and therefore decided to build a sanctuary that could resist empires and wars. And so it has been. Ani. At the border between Turkey and Armenia, Ani rises like a mirage, in a plain where the wind carries echoes of vanished caravans. Also called the City of 1,001 Churches, today it shows only the ruins of a medieval capital that housed 100,000 inhabitants, when London counted just 30,000. The red walls of the cathedral rise against the sky and tell of a time when this place represented the crossroads of cultures and religions on the Silk Road. Moreover, a collapsed bridge over the Arpacai River marks the border between 2 nations and physically divides what history has united for centuries. Here, archaeologists continue to discover mosaics and inscriptions beneath the earth, while shepherds lead their flocks among buildings that once housed kings and merchants. Silence speaks louder than words in this place and allows tourists to listen to the voice of a city abandoned in the 14th century after several invasions and earthquakes. Mardin. Atop a hill in southeastern Turkey, this city climbs with honey-colored houses built one on top of another. Mardin tells centuries of coexistence between different cultures and religions, and shows monasteries, mosques, and churches that share the same horizon over the Mesopotamian plain. At the center of the city stands the imposing minaret of the Grand Mosque, a slender tower that rises toward the sky as a visible reference point from every corner. The monastery of Deir el-Zafaran, founded in the 9th century, preserves ancient manuscripts in a library where time seems to have stopped. In the cobbled alleys of the old city, meanwhile, the fragrances of spices spread from the bazaars, while visitors marvel at the geometric patterns carved into the facades of the madrasas. Finally, from every terrace, the gaze embraces the immense Mesopotamian plain, offering one of the most spectacular panoramas in Turkey. Aspendos. In southern Turkey, Aspendos guards a secret that has defied time for almost 2,000 years. We are talking about the Roman theater, which rises on the plain with a facade that reaches 30 meters in height, while the acoustics inside allow one to hear a whisper from the stage to the last row. The ancient builders positioned each stone with such precision that today spectators still occupy these seats for classical music concerts and international festivals. Then there is the Roman aqueduct, which brought water to the city from 15 kilometers away and crosses the countryside with arches that still resist earthquakes today, thanks to incredible construction techniques. Aspendos is much more than a monument to visit. It is a testimony to how human ingenuity can create works that survive the civilizations that generated them. Ephesus. In a silent Turkish valley, Ephesus emerges as a witness to a lost era. The columns of the Library of Celsus rise toward the sky and tell of a time when this place housed thousands of precious scrolls. The Great Theater, carved into the hillside, once hosted 20,000 spectators who listened to poets and playwrights under the stars. Archaeologists even today continue to discover mosaics hidden beneath the earth, and it is precisely for this reason that each year the city reveals new secrets. Then there are the traces of the Marble Road, which lead to the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, now reduced to a single column that defies time. When the sun sets, the ancient stones absorb the last rays of sunlight and seem to come alive. Ephesus represents not just ruins to photograph, but an open-air history book where every visitor becomes a protagonist in a journey through centuries of civilization. Fethiye and Ölüdeniz. Where the mountains meet the sea, we find Fethiye, which develops around a natural harbor that sailors have frequented for millennia. The Lycian tombs carved into the rock observe the modern city from the hill, connecting the present to a past dating back to 450 BC. The market, meanwhile, comes alive every Tuesday, while cafes on the waterfront fill with visitors who observe traditional wooden boats built according to ancient techniques. When evening falls on the bay, fish restaurants light up, and the smell of fresh food attracts local families and travelers. A few kilometers away, Ölüdeniz hides a lagoon, separated from the open sea by a tongue of white sand. Here, the water changes hue from turquoise to deep blue, creating a unique spectacle. Paragliders launch from Mount Babada and glide over this incredible panorama, while Butterfly Valley, preferably accessible by sea, protects rare species in a deep canyon, surrounded by rocky walls. Fethiye and Ölüdeniz offer not just relaxation, but an immersion in a world where nature and history are inextricably intertwined. Kaş and Kekaba. On the edge of the Mediterranean, we find Kaş, a small jewel set between mountains that descend gently to the sea. Its characteristic historic center is distinguished by narrow streets, which intertwine between white houses and colorful little shops. Here, cafes often fill with tourists, while the sun illuminates the spectacular Kaputas Beach, which is a small inlet of golden sand nestled between high cliffs, also accessible via a steep staircase of 187 steps. And then there are numerous exclusive beach clubs, which offer relaxation on wooden platforms facing directly onto the sea, allowing one to dive into the turquoise waters between one cocktail and another. At a short distance, we find the region of Kakova, an archaeological paradise that combines land and sea. Its ancient Lycian city is partially submerged following an earthquake, with underwater ruins visible through the water, while imposing structures stand on land, including Simina Castle, which dominates the landscape from above. Kakova Island, moreover, protects and calms the stretch of sea where traditional boats stop to allow tourists to observe history through the water. Istanbul. At the point where two continents meet, Istanbul tells a story that began centuries ago through its streets. This city stands on the shores of the Bosphorus and connects Europe to Asia, not only geographically, but also culturally. The minarets of the Blue Mosque rise toward the sky, while the sunset transforms the horizon into a spectacle of colors. Inside, light filters through 200 windows and illuminates thousands of blue tiles that cover the walls. Just a few steps from here, however, Hagia Sophia dominates the skyline with its imposing dome that has defied gravity for 1,500 years. This building has lived as a Byzantine cathedral, a museum, and an Ottoman mosque. Therefore, it tells the transformation of the city better than any history book. Furthermore, when merchants open their shops in the Grand Bazaar, the scent of spices spreads through the corridors, where trading has been done for centuries. Istanbul, therefore, is not just a place to visit, but an experience to live that remains imprinted in the memory of those who walk its streets full of history. Pamukkale. Water has been flowing for about 14,000 years on the hill of Pamukkale, where white travertine pools overflow with thermal waters, which gradually descend toward the valley. The minerals dissolved in the water create formations that look like solidified clouds, or waterfalls frozen in time. Visitors here walk barefoot on the terraces while the hot water flows between their fingers. At the top of the hill, moreover, the ruins of Hierapolis tell the story of the Romans, who built a thermal city to exploit these calcium-rich waters, with a theater still standing that hosted 10,000 spectators. At sunset, this place transforms. The water mirrors the golden sky, and Pamukkale lights up like a phenomenon that defies the logic of nature, offering an experience that surpasses imagination. Lake Van and Akdamar. At the easternmost point of Turkey, Lake Van extends like an inland sea at 1,650 meters altitude. The alkaline waters create a unique ecosystem where the Van fish swims, an endemic species that lives only here and adapts to conditions that other animals would not tolerate. In the background stands the profile of Mount Sufan, a volcano that dominates the landscape. Then 20 minutes sailing from the shore, Akdamar Island pops up from the water with a 10th century Armenian church, which features bas-reliefs that tell biblical stories with surprising details. The scenes of Adam and Eve, David and Goliath, Jonah and the whale survived time and weather, thus testifying to an art that united East and West. Patara. Where history meets the sea, Patara preserves 12 kilometers of pristine beach, which sea turtles still choose today to lay their eggs. The ancient port, now silted up, recalls a past when commercial ships docked here from all over the Mediterranean, while the Roman amphitheater emerges from the sand. It is right here that archaeologists continuously discover new buildings every year and gradually reveal a city that gave birth to Saint Nicholas, the bishop who inspired the figure of Santa Claus. Moreover, the presence of the Lycian Parliament, the first example of federal democracy in the world, testifies to a political system that inspired the founding fathers of the United States. As the sun sets, tourists still walk among the fallen columns, where once passed merchants, philosophers, and sailors. It is the sign of an authentic encounter between different civilizations that have left traces in the sand that the wind has never erased. Ihlara Valley. In the heart of Anatolia, the land opens into a canyon 100 meters deep, where the Melendiz River flows between walls of volcanic rock. The valley enchants with its unique geological formations, created over millennia by the erosion of solidified lava from Mount Hassan. The natural cavities in the volcanic rock indeed create a surreal landscape, with niches and openings that overlook the valley below, rich in flora. The paths develop among pistachio and walnut trees, while the sound of water accompanies hikers, who can also take breaks in bars carved from natural caves. Moreover, the villages on top of the canyon hand down their ancient traditions with women, who produce carpets according to designs passed down through generations. Lake Tuz. In central Anatolia, Lake Tuz spreads like a white mirror of salt, covering 1,500 square kilometers. During summer, the water evaporates and leaves a layer of salt 15 centimeters thick, where tourists walk, as if they were on snow that never melts. When the lake contains water, however, especially after spring rains, its calm surface creates a perfect mirror effect, where sky and earth merge, until the horizon line disappears. It is during this period that thousands of flamingos migrate here, transforming the landscape into an expanse of pink hues, which magnificently contrasts with the dazzling white of the salt. At sunset, moreover, the grazing light enhances these colors, creating plays of reflections, which in their simplicity generate a natural spectacle of rare beauty. Amasya. Between mountains that reflect in the waters of the Yeşilırmak River, a city shows Ottoman wooden houses that seem to cling to the shore. On the steep rocky wall that dominates the city, there are the impressive rock tombs of the kings of Pontus, carved into the rock about 2,000 years ago, when Amasya was the capital of this ancient kingdom. Centuries later, during the Ottoman era, the city also became a place of education for the princes of the dynasty. Here, future sultans studied the art of government, away from the distractions of Istanbul, but immersed in culture in a refined environment that has left a rich heritage of madrasas, mosques, and palaces. Safranbolu. Among the green hills in northern Turkey, this city preserves 800 Ottoman houses that time has left intact. The city owes its name to the saffron that merchants sold along the Silk Road, and still carries the scent of this precious spice today. The dwellings in wood and stone tell the life of the bourgeoisie, with hand-decorated ceilings and windows that filter light in geometric patterns. Artisans continue to work copper and leather in the shops of the old bazaar. While the scent of lokum, the Turkish delight, spreads from the pastry shops in the center. Safranbolu is certainly an example of how traditional architecture can survive industrialization and continue to tell, even today, the story of the families who have lived between these walls. Kayaköy. Among the hills of the Turkish coast, Kayaköy shows a history of abandonment, which time has preserved in 400 stone houses, now empty. The village, inhabited by Greeks until 1923, was emptied during the population exchange between Greece and Turkey, and thus left only echoes of past lives among its now silent alleys. The Orthodox churches maintain fragments of frescoes which resist rain and wind, while windows without glass provide a backdrop to the sky. Wildcats are now the only permanent inhabitants, and wander the streets where once resonated the voices of merchants and artisans. Besides being a ghost village, this place has left a testimony of how politics can change the destiny of entire communities and transform daily life into history in an instant. Dalyan. Between sea and mountains, there is a small town characterized by a unique ecosystem, where water draws labyrinths of channels through reeds that protect rare species of birds. Kereta turtles lay their eggs on the nearby Iztusu beach, and it is for this reason that some areas are closed at sunset to protect the nests. The Dalyan River, which gives the town its name, opens into an intricate lagoon system before reaching the sea, creating those aquatic labyrinths where traditional wooden boats, taka, pass silently, allowing tourists to immerse themselves in this natural sanctuary rich in flamingos and herons. On the rock face that dominates the river, finally ancient tombs observe the landscape from niches carved into the stone and testify precisely to the sacredness of this land for ancient civilizations. Lake Salda. In western Anatolia, a lake hides a secret which NASA studies to understand Mars. Its turquoise waters contain minerals similar to those found on the red planet, thus offering scientists clues about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. The white sand, composed of magnesium, makes a sound similar to glass when visitors walk on the shore, while the alkaline water creates an environment where only a few species of bacteria can survive. The lake formed 10,000 years ago in a tectonic manner and maintains a depth of 184 meters, making it the deepest lake in the nation. And then there are the locals who tell legends of creatures that inhabit the depths while swimming in these waters, which are said to have curative properties for the skin. Konya. It is famous for being the city of Rumi, the poet who in the 13th century initiated the formation of the order of whirling dervishes. In the center of the city, indeed, is the mausoleum dedicated to him, recognizable by the characteristic turquoise dome, which also houses the Mevlana Museum with precious manuscripts and personal belongings of the mystic poet, and toward which visitors arrive from all over the world to pay homage to him. The dervishes, who are the followers of Rumi, are known for their particular dance called Sema, in which they rotate on themselves with symbolic movements, such as arms toward the sky, or with one arm facing upward and the other toward the earth. Furthermore, other important mosques in the city are the Aziziyeh with its twin towers and the Selamiyeh with its fountain, both representing the rich monumental heritage of Konya, where one still breathes today an atmosphere of peace and spirituality in which art, poetry, and religious traditions blend harmoniously. Marmaris. Between mountains and clear waters, Marmaris embraces a natural bay that sailors have frequented for 3,000 years. The port by now hosts both luxury yachts and traditional boats, which depart every morning for cruises along the coast. The castle, rebuilt in 1522, dominates the old town, with walls that protected the population from pirates in the Middle Ages. The historic center, moreover, enchants with its stone lanes and whitewashed houses, where purple and fuchsia bougainvillea cascade from balconies, creating an authentic and relaxed Mediterranean atmosphere. So here this city represents not just a seaside destination, but a mix of history and fun, which often gives tourists a unique experience. Ankara. A city that in 1923, while the Ottoman Empire gave way to the Republic, was elevated to capital of the new nation. The hill of Anıt Kabir guards the mausoleum of Ataturk, founder of modern Turkey, where soldiers march in ceremonies that celebrate the passage from tradition to modernity. The Byzantine citadel, with its imposing stone walls, dominates the urban panorama, preserving within it stone lanes, restored Ottoman houses, and remains of ancient watchtowers. The numerous green parks, meanwhile, such as the vast Gençlik Park with its artificial lake, offers spaces for relaxation and refreshment to citizens, creating a surprising contrast with the surrounding urban architecture. Ankara, therefore, represents not just the administrative center of the country, but the heart of a nation that seeks balance between past and future. Mount Nemrut. Atop a mountain in eastern Turkey at 2,134 meters altitude, giant stone heads observe the world from 2,000 years ago. Mount Nemrut guards the funerary sanctuary of King Antiochus I, where statues up to 9 meters tall represent Greco-Persian deities, which watch over the stone tumulus. Archaeologists have never found the king's tomb, so the mystery still hides under tons of rock. The sculpted faces, meanwhile, have lost their noses and ears, but retain expressions that seem to change with the daylight. During the winter months, snow entirely covers this site, isolating the statues in a white silence and making access impossible for visitors until spring. Göbekli Tepe. In the heart of Turkey rises an enigma, which has rewritten the history of humanity. Göbekli Tepe was hidden underground for 10,000 years before archaeologists brought it to light in 1995. The circular structures emerge from the ground, with stone pillars up to 6 meters tall, challenging every previous theory on human evolution. Stone Age men, without metal or wheel, moved blocks of 15 tons and decorated them with animal engravings, which still tell stories lost in time. Even now, researchers continue to dig, while questions multiply. Why did a society of hunter-gatherers build such a monumental complex? The site even precedes Stonehenge by 6,000 years, therefore forcing historians to rethink the origin of civilization. Precisely for this reason, Göbekli Tepe represents not just an archaeological site, but a missing chapter of humanity, which re-emerges from silence. Mount Ararat. At the eastern border of Turkey, Mount Ararat rises to 5,137 meters, with a peak perpetually covered with snow. This sacred mountain appears in the narratives of three religions as the place where Noah's Ark landed after the flood, therefore attracting explorers seeking traces of the biblical vessel among glaciers and volcanic rocks. Kurdish communities live at the foot of the mountain, while the fauna includes bears, wolves, and lynx, which move among the remote valleys where few humans venture. Finally, at the foot of the mountain, there is also the Old Bayezid Mosque, an Ottoman architectural masterpiece from the 16th century, with its elegant dome and minaret that stand out against the background. Concluding this visual journey through Turkey, we have moved among its millennial ruins and its most spectacular landscapes, exploring together not only places, but also curiosities that make every corner of this land unique. We hope that the images and stories told have enriched your knowledge and stimulated the desire to personally explore the extraordinary beauty of this fascinating country.